everybody in the NB Poli world, and welcome back to another week. I am here in Mennequist in St. John, New Brunswick, on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoq, and the Pasquatomacati. And we missed last week, and I am so sorry that we are also sort of missing this week. We're trying to line up some interviews, and then we're not getting back information from people in time to do an interview, and then we're missing the time. So we should have scheduled some of these a little further out. And to be honest, both of us, Joanna and I, have just been running at both ends. Obviously, we've got both of our jobs. I took on a job helping an Indigenous business trying to get open here, ideally before National Indigenous Day on the 21st. So if you are in St. John, make sure you check out 1778 Trading Post. And you can see some of our handiwork there from the Two Library. Myself and my buddy Mikey have been down there. I've put in multiple 12, 14-hour days, and the podcast was just too hard to wrestle into a schedule. So apologies to you, our loyal listeners. We weren't planning to start the summer break yet, and then we talked about, okay, well, maybe we should because it is getting busy. But now we have a couple of interviews that we are trying to nail down, and we're close to nailing down. We have Andrea Anderson Mason. So remember how we were literally dreaming of a conservative out there who would have a fulsome, long-form conversation just about what is going on within that party, what is going on with conservatives in this province. They're very much here. They're very much alive. They very much think things. We just haven't heard much about them. So we are pretty much nailed that down for the week after next. So next week is graduation and public accounts committee up in Fredericton. So Andrea's tied up there. So next week we will be back regardless with somebody. And there are a couple people. We have Donald Savoy, who may come on the pod, author of a book, Looking for Bootstraps, just sort of about the economic development piece in New Brunswick. And Fred LaForge, if you're listening, that kind of goes out to you, man. You sent us a couple of questions about economic development, and we gave some sort of haphazard answers and some thoughts and some ponderings, but we didn't give a lot of attention to it. So we are going to try to give some attention to that. So we're hoping to nail that down as well. We've got an email into Dominic Carty to try to get that done, because if any of you were on Twitter, you will have seen that we had a conversation with Dominic Carty on Twitter. But this week, for those of you who are watching Rogers, don't worry. It's not going to all be audio. You're just hearing my voice as I record the intro. We are going to go back. We're going to go back in time to a conversation we had with Doug Griffiths, who's a former cabinet minister in Alberta. Doug is the author of 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. We interviewed Doug last year, and, there are surprisingly, a lot of similarities between Alberta politics and New Brunswick, certainly within the conservative sphere of influence and politics and politicians and thought. I mean, Blaine Higgs was just out there fundraising. We've seen some fundraising numbers come back for 2023. And obviously, first, second, third, Progressive Conservatives with first, second for the Libs, the Greens with third, actually not very far behind the Liberals. So pretty disappointing numbers for the Liberals, which we will talk about next week. Some polling data. We'll probably get Sean Rouse back. Thank you, Sean, for all of your help. But like I said, this week we wanted to revisit that conversation with Doug so we could get a better handle on what is some of the thought and some of the differences of opinion. And what I think is interesting about the conversation with Doug is this is a guy who came in as a new MLA under Alison Redford with the Conservative Party in Alberta, and spent, the better part of a decade in politics, in different cabinet positions. And so he has a lot to talk about. He has a lot of different perspectives around municipal politics, economic development, and we're going to hear from him. And we will switch over to the original recording we did last summer. So up next is our interview with Doug Griffiths.
Recording.
All right, so we're coming to you live, everybody. Summer edition here. We're here for chat. NB Poli World here. We're here for a chat with Doug Griffiths. We've talked about this individual. We've kind of teased him out over episodes to say we've got this interesting character that we're going to be bringing on that has background in Alberta politics and has written books and things like that. So now here he is. This is Doug Griffiths. We're really happy to have you, Doug. And we just want to start with some introductions so that people can hear about who you are and your background. And then we're just going to jump into a bit of a free-flowing conversation here, probably picking up on this Ralph Klein piece that we just talked about. But anyway, go ahead. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing right now.
From a small town in Alberta, worried about I was a teacher and a rancher, and then I lived in between the two towns, one where I ranched and one where I taught. And I was concerned about how all three communities were dying. So I shot my mouth off about the need for a rural community development strategy, and that landed me in provincial politics. I served 13 years. I had 2 senior cabinet portfolios, 3 junior ones. I wrote a rural development strategy for the province, which is what got me there. And then I deliberately resigned before the end of my last term to go back to community building and helping with communities. In the process, I also wrote 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, which is a national bestseller in the US and Canada. And then I did a second edition, which also became its own national bestseller. So, and now I'm actively trying to get down another book. And I've got a company called 13 Ways, and I work with municipalities, communities, economic development alliances, and chambers of commerce all over North America. Myself and my team do. I think community building is the single most important job on earth. So I think I'm close to dedicating my whole life to it, but I hope it's a long life. Like, I'm not saying it's going to end anytime soon, but what I'm passionate about.
So you came by it honestly, like you were naturally interested in trying to build out not just your own sort of regional development strategy, but then you brought that to quite a next level when you enter provincial politics. So you didn't do the municipal road first. You kind of went right through.
Yeah, politics interests me because I volunteered at first federally in politics. I was interested in international stuff, and then volunteered some provincially, and then like just coming back and being a junior high teacher and having my cows and horses, I just started to see that all 3 of the towns were dying. And so instead of it wasn't based on an interest in politics at that time. It was based on a desperate need to do something, and that's what led me into provincial politics.
So one of the reasons I know I was excited to have you here was your specific minister role in local government that you had. So I'm wondering if you're able to elaborate a little bit on what that looked like for you at the time and what kind of initiatives, projects, policies you were working on when you were right in there.
Yeah. You know what? So I served under 5 different premiers in Alberta. And when the current premier had announced that he was going to retire, that was Ed Stelmach. I thought, well, I'm going to run. So I was the only non-cabinet minister to put my name forward, and I campaigned on the need for communities to be successful. And when I lost, which I'm glad I did, looking back, I don't know if I really wanted to be premier. I wanted to make sure the issues were addressed. Alison Redford became premier, and she made me Minister of Municipal Affairs because of my advocacy for communities. And we did some really good stuff on collaboration, cooperation, which I think the lack of collaboration and cooperation between municipalities is still is the plague of the 21st century all over North America for municipalities. They sit there focused on maintaining their power and their autonomy and their identity. And what happens is they refuse to work together because of that, because they're going to be their own, except they don't have the resources available to do marketing and branding and engagement and communication. And then they wind up shrinking and dying. The very thing they were trying to hold on to is the very cause of why they wind up failing. So we did a lot of work on collaboration and cooperation, economic development, education. We created a huge fund. It was unprecedented, $100 million for rural communities to go try new things that help them reinvent themselves. It was pretty exciting stuff. But then in 2013, only got to work for a year and a half on it. And then we had the major floods in southern Alberta that devastated 29 communities. And that sort of distracted me for the next 2 years. And then the Premier Redford did a cabinet shuffle, and I was moved over to Service Alberta. So I didn't have nearly enough time to finish what I wanted to, but part of the reason for resigning was so I could go back to help individual communities do what I said they should have been doing in the first place. So.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, we have a pretty significant situation here in New Brunswick that we have found to be unlike anywhere else in the country. We keep talking about different layers of New Brunswick problems and how we're the only ones that have them. But obviously, there's a lot of shared situational challenges that we would have with other municipalities. But I wanted to just spend a few minutes here, and like Joe, you can jump in and add to this pile either in between or at the end. But I just want to take kind of that knowledge set that you have and that experience set and just give you a chance to comment on what we're going through. Now, you listened to Jerry Ioannis' conversation with us on tax equity and some of these problems that exist here in New Brunswick locally. You probably heard some of this, but when we travel and we go and talk to other municipal officials, especially from Alberta, we find there is often a real sense of shock when we tell them about certain realities that we face in New Brunswick. So one of those realities in New Brunswick is that around assessments around heavy industry. And a lot of people in Canada at the political level, commentary level, would look at Alberta and say, Alberta is that bastion of oil and energy, sovereignty and energy policy. And damn it, they want to hold on to that competitive advantage they have around oil. And yeah, of course, you guys are trying to move toward renewables quite aggressively, more so than almost anybody else at the current moment. But what they don't realize is that in St. John, New Brunswick, we have Canada's largest oil refinery that pays less taxes toward the municipality than the regional hospital. And we have the presence, more industry per capita, I would say, in St. John than maybe any other city. But yet we have Canada's highest child poverty rate. We have one of the biggest rates of dilapidated and abandoned buildings in the country. Actually, we do have the most dilapidated buildings per capita. Winnipeg would be second to us, from what I understand. So I just keep adding these layers on because, we have a deep water port. We have an LNG terminal. We have an oil refinery, Canada's largest. We have a huge pulp and paper mill that's been modernized. But the problem we have, and this kind of is going to layer on to the point you were making about municipalities not collaborating, most of the people that work these good paying industry jobs live outside of the city. So we host the risk as well as we host the job sites and the industry sites for these jobs to exist. But the wealth and the people who make that money really don't have any incentive to live near that. So they go into these outside communities and they end up holding the city hostage on issues that require sort of collaboration. And so the city ends up having very little bargaining chip to make these outside communities play ball. And we kind of find ourselves like the other communities in this province don't really have that problem because we host most of the industry in this province. So I just figured I'd drop that. I don't know if I missed anything, Joe, but just drop that example and say where can you speak to a place about in your own experiences where something is similar, maybe it was in the past and you were able to transition it, because it seems from our perspective that Alberta has a lot more right around their heavy industry policy or taxation policy than we do.
Well, I think we did. A lot of municipalities had higher taxation rates for industry so that they could help support some of the quality of life aspects that make people want to live there. That's changed over the last years of the last couple of governments since I've left primarily. There's a cap now on how much how much higher your mill rate can be for those heavy industries over your residential, which has had significant impacts on a lot of municipalities. I mean, one good example was Fort McMurray that used to make a lot of money because of the oil sands and the industry that was up there, that lost millions and millions and millions of dollars in revenue when they were forced to lower the mill rate to a certain level. And
what is that threshold? Sorry.
You know what? I don't want to say it's.
Is it like 4.5? Is that the maximum?
Yeah, it's I think something like that, 4.5, and it used to be in some places more like 7.
Right.
So it's had some significant impact and impacted revenue. And then, like I think it may be a little bit of the same mentality. We need that industry, so we don't want them to be encouraged to go somewhere else and leave. We've done the same things over the last couple of years with tax rebates for oil companies, but are hoping that they create more jobs. A lot of them took the revenue, the rebate that they got, and then moved to the U.S. and didn't create a single job. So we surrendered some tax revenue. Even in some cases, there's been new legislation that makes it difficult for municipalities to collect unpaid taxes in linear assessment in some heavy industries, which has meant that they have millions of dollars of shortfalls in their budget. So unfortunately, I think that Alberta might be adopting a bit more of that that mindset, which has a negative impact on communities. But it's not just the provincial government. I mean, we do have some examples of similar circumstances. The city of Edmonton is a very metropolitan center, a lot of residences, not a lot of industry. So its tax-based mix faces a challenge. They have residence tax base doesn't typically support everything you need in government. You need to have industry and commercial available. But most of the industry and commercial is around the fringes in Strathcona County and Leduc and the municipalities around the outside. So we have the same thing. People move out. They get good housing with bigger housing, bigger backyards, bigger acreages. They live there. That municipality collects the industry tax, which allows them to offer better quality of life. And so the city of Edmonton is constantly challenged with having homelessness issues, unhoused people's issues. It's got mental health issues that it deals with. It's got vacancies in the downtown core. It needs to invest in infrastructure, but it doesn't necessarily have the tax base that the neighboring municipalities do. So, I mean, in our case, there's great initiatives like the Edmonton Metropolitan Region, the Edmonton Metropolitan Board, work done by Global Edmonton, work done on the travel sector to try and fix some of those balances. But I mean, it's a never-ending struggle because, I mean, it all comes down to the fact that these are artificial boundaries that create arguments between the two municipalities. It's just an artificial boundary, but one has a little bit more money, one has a little more issues, and now they have to find a way to negotiate, and someone always has the upper hand, which makes it difficult to come to a resolution. Yeah, and I've seen that all over North America.
Yeah. You've been working with municipalities as a consultant now for how many years?
8 since I left politics.
8 years. Okay.
Yeah. And I've been through rehab. I'm not going back to politics. I've fully recovered now, so there's no. I don't want any recidivism here.
You got it.
You look pretty relaxed for someone who was involved in politics for so
Even
long.
the gray went out of my hair. It's since come back a bit, but it went out of my hair when I left politics.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to dovetail a little bit on that. There was some folks who I had sent along your profile and your background to who had some questions for you as well.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
Before we get to the questions, can I just
sure.
do a little follow-up to the last one?
Absolutely.
Because I think some of the questions are going to go in some other good directions too. But just on this last piece, what you're talking about, Doug, the one that I find kind of so when we compare ourselves here in St. John, we're often comparing ourselves to Louisiana. And the reason is because they also have some of the biggest GDP exporters and makers in the country. And they're in the same postal code as, America's highest, one of their lowest literacy rates, highest criminal rates, highest poverty rates, you name it. But it's an interesting group down there, a group of citizens getting together, and they start the presentation with a breakdown of here's a postal code, and here's a postal code, and this one has, 5 of the biggest Fortune 500 companies. It has this, much GDP per export. It has all this, and then they say here's this other postal code, and they end up being the same postal code, right? And we within that, it's I guess the burning question I have. We've just gone through a local governance reform. We used to have almost 400 municipal entities in a province of 800,000 people. It was absolutely bonkers. And
for comparison, we have almost 5 million, and we have 344 now, I think.
Yeah, you had 344 municipalities.
Yeah, and with almost 5 million people, and I still think we have too many.
Yeah.
You're still not, Saskatchewan has less than 1 million people, or right around 1 million people, and they have over 800.
Oh
Yep,
my gosh.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been about the percentage, right? Because
Yeah.
we're almost to 400. And it's just like you compare it to Nova Scotia that has 50 for a population of 1 million plus. Just over 1 million, I think theirs is. But within this municipal reform, we have this opportunity right now as municipal leaders, but also people who are going to be canvassing provincial politicians as well, to try to, like, before any of this is all galvanized and all rewritten and concrete, has hardened on this new reform. We've trimmed that to 90 entities, and some amalgamations. Now, nothing for St. John on that front. Really, there's no changes to our boundaries or our situation. But we are trying to develop a regional economic development piece. So this kind of hits on this last piece of your comment about working people with economic development. This is one that continues to frustrate us and other municipal councillors. It's like economic development is the thing they say you need when you're not growing. And when you are growing, economic development agencies want to take all the credit for it, even though it's sometimes almost impossible to trace what they did to the outcome. So, for example, we have a province that's growing right now. It's talking about surpluses. Everybody wanted to move to New Brunswick during the pandemic. And so we have a major housing crisis because of mostly migration from other provinces here. And, we have this new economic development agency, and the province is trying to take credit for all these things. But we often just struggle to figure out what to ask this economic development agency to do as a unit, because it's regional. So I'm wondering if you can comment on what good, successful regional approaches are to economic development that you've seen that stand out, because it is a burning question for all municipalities in New Brunswick right now, because we're all being forced to do a regional approach.
Yeah, and I support that. I think that it's important. The what makes a successful regional approach, we've seen this in countless examples around North America, and even helped with creating some of these regional approaches, is to understand that as a region, you need to be competitive with other regions. So I tell everybody, we're not competing against the community down the road anymore. We're competing against Louisiana and with Raleigh, North Carolina, and with the Edmonton Metro Board, and the greater Vancouver region. This is what we're doing. So you need to take a regional approach. But if you lose the elements that make you unique within that region, then you miss the point. I mean, then every region says, "Oh, we're perfect. We have everything to offer." So in the, for instance, in the Edmonton metropolitan region, here I'm going to tell you this story. When I was Minister of Municipal Affairs, I went in to see that this region was called the Capital Region. And it was called the Capital Region because Edmonton's the capital of Alberta. Right. But I challenged them for a while that why do you call it the Capital Region? And they kept saying, well, we can't have it called the Edmonton region because it's not just about Edmonton. There's 13 significant municipalities in this region, and we can't name it after Edmonton. So I pulled up on the slide. I pulled up and Google searched the Capital Region, and Edmonton. I showed them that you had to get to page 4 on Google to find the Capital Region that was Edmonton, because all the rest of them were other capital regions around the world. And then I said it kind of jokingly, but with some sincerity that if you want to bury a dead body, you do it on page 2 of Google, because nobody looks there.
That's right.
And you're on page 4. So how are you going to be found? You need to change it to the Edmonton Metropolitan Board. And what you need to sell then is that it's the Edmonton Metropolitan Region. But Beaumont is a beautiful, wonderful community with ethnic diversities. They've got French on the stop signs. They're very technologically focused with great community leadership. Leduc is a little more industrial, but a great place for industries to invest. Strathcona County is a little more rural, and it's got some of the farmland, but it's got an urban center. But if you want walkability, you should go to St. Albert, because St. Albert's a good walkable community, right? Every single community out of the 13 has something unique to offer. If you whitewash it over to make it all look the same, then you're going to lose the uniqueness of each. You need to attract people to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region so they understand its greater economic benefits, the available of agricultural land, industrial land, a stable workforce, pretty good access to international markets with Port Edmonton and the Airport Authority, and like leverage those things. And then when people and businesses come, then you can sell them and explain to them, do you want Beaumont? Are you looking for Leduc? Maybe it's St. Albert you want. Maybe it's Fort Saskatchewan you want. Then you can, maybe it's Edmonton. You can market those individual communities within. But if no one comes here, no businesses are looking here, then you've got nothing to market. So in every regional project, you've got to find what makes the region unique, and it will be a composite of what makes each of the communities unique. That's the stories you need to tell and pull together. It's sort of like a good corporation doesn't just tell you what the company stands for, it tells you the talent they have of their individual people too. That's what makes you build those connections. It's the same with a regional marketing strategy. Sell the region as a composite of its individual parts.
And so on that note, how, like, I understand what you're saying. Everybody has these competitive advantages, so play to your strengths and don't worry about trying to be everything to everybody, because you end up being nothing to everybody, you know, or however the saying goes. But when you have a situation where municipalities don't equitably share in the regional problems, and therefore, right, so you think of, I'm like thinking about your example. You mentioned the struggles that Edmonton has socially. How does Edmonton go about creating, I guess, shared action and common action to tackle that problem at a regional level, when Leduc and Strathcona are really not going to want to inherit the problems of Edmonton and don't really have any hard incentive to be in that camp? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the
I know
bargaining,
exactly.
the bargaining chips just seem hard to work out when there's nobody shares equitably in the problems. That's all. Yeah.
I know. I had one of the mayors within this region say to me once, well, my job, I have a fiduciary duty to the people in my municipality who elected me.
Right.
I said, well, if you think that your municipality is going to be successful while every other one in the region dies, then you're mistaken about how this works. Mm-hmm. Just because there's a boundary there, a political boundary that was drawn, does not make it it's not a wall. And we don't need to build walls. We need to tear the walls down, because you can't keep the problems on the other side of this artificial boundary you've created. But personally, I mean, that's why most politics, in my mind, has to come down to psychology. We think that people, we tend to act in our own self-interest, and because it's frightening. And so you're right. Those other municipalities will say, well, how am I going to give money that my taxpayers paid or that are raised from my industries in my area to another jurisdiction? I mean, my public's going to beat me up over that. They're going to say, well, you're keep it at home. So their hands are a bit tied. And then even if they do find a way to do it, how do you even measure the results? Like, just like you'd said, Brent, before about an economic development officer hiring a team, how do you even prove that that's actually the reason why things got better or changed? So there's kind of I'm just giving this to you, giving you more of our tax revenue. And then what if they spend it on the wrong thing? Like, what if they're not actually reducing homelessness? What if it doesn't fix the homelessness problem? And so you're waiting for results after 2 years, but it takes 5 years to start to really address and bring down the homelessness challenge. Yes. So, I mean, everybody wants real results. The public wants everything to be in their own. And so it takes some pretty profound leadership, some understanding about the psychology that people have, including the public, their mindsets and what holds them back. And I don't think the bigger the jurisdiction, the more multiplicity with the municipalities involved. I don't think, out of the kindness of my own heart is going to lead to solutions, because all it takes is one moment for it to fall apart. I think we need to restructure. And the challenge, the way I approach it all the time, and I said it many times as a minister of municipal affairs, and I say it with our clients, I want you to think about, is this the way you would have designed it if you went back 100 years and started from scratch, knowing what you're going to be at now? And if you say yes, I want you to think, is that because you have the upper hand and the advantage of more money, or is it because you're at a disadvantage? I mean, we sort of need this behind the blind veil mindset that you don't know which municipality you'll be in. So I want you to sit back and create a system that's going to create the best equity and the best communities and the strongest province or the strongest region, without knowing where you're from. And it takes a pretty wise group to sit down and do that. And if once they design that system, though, it's very close to the kind of system you should need. And that's when political leadership has to step up and say, okay, well, we're going to do things differently. And sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but here's a thought process I take everybody through. The keyboards that we use now are referred to as a QWERTY keyboard because those are the letters across the top. And you've probably heard this before.
About the Dvorak simplified version.
Yes. The reason why the QWERTY keyboard was invented was because they had to slow people down on old typewriters so those prongs would get stuck together. And yet we still all use the QWERTY keyboard. It doesn't mean it's the best system. In fact, it leads to carpal tunnel syndrome. It slows down typing. We have remnants from generations ago that we still live by, even though they're wrong for us and don't help us move to the future.
You get locked in.
The tendency is for us to say, well, we can't change things now. Well, when are you going to change them? I mean, one of my favorite quotes from Taoism is there's only 2 times to plant a tree, 20 years ago when you should have, and now. If you don't do things now, 20 years from now, they're going to say, damn it, I wish they had. And it's not going to be perfect. But if you can get a group of leaders that say, I don't know what municipality I'm going to be from, I'm just going to try and figure out how to make this region better, you'll probably come up with a better system, and then you got to have the guts to implement it. And that's the only way we're going to fix these issues.
That's big. Yeah.
Oh, we'll be sending that blurb to a few folks from our region. Absolutely. That's so fascinating. And is there any good examples you have of regions sort of who have tackled this and are doing it well that you can point to? Because this is amazing.
There are some good ones. We just did on our podcast. Excuse me, because I think they're my favorite example of municipal collaboration. The city of Portage la Prairie in Manitoba and the regional municipality or the rural municipality of Portage la Prairie. Like I tell people, if you're going to have real collaboration, you got to have revenue sharing. So that any new project that's done, you share the revenue between municipalities, and that way nobody actually starts to care where it's done. You find the best location for it, and then everyone has the resources they need to build a quality of life. Like one of the foundational first principles of having a good regional collaboration. Well, these 2 municipalities got together 23 years ago and created a revenue sharing agreement so that they honestly don't care whether it goes in the city or it goes in the county. They work together on land development. They work together. They have one office for they call it a concierge service. One office where if you need a building permit, you need a development permit, you need to find out what to do. It's the county, the RM, and it is the city with one office. And so they help you with streamlined processes. They help you find the land, and they selflessly say, doesn't matter to us where it is because we're both going to share in the revenue. What we need is this to be there. And now they're discussing housing issues, which everyone has to be discussing. It's one of the biggest issues. And that's a workforce issue too, because if you don't have the housing, you don't have a workforce. So they're starting to tackle these travel, tourism industry. They're tackling all these big issues together. And to me, I'd be hard pressed to say that there was another region, and it works beautifully because there's 2 of them. It's always easier for partnership with 2. When you get multiple stakeholders in, it gets more complex. But to me, when people say, well, that'll never work, you can't do revenue sharing. There's a 23-year-old example of municipalities doing it, and it's a hugely successful region that attracts a lot of industry and a lot of people. And it's a remarkable story in my mind.
So would you say?
And I like to, sorry, Joanna, I like to say it because people always say it won't work, it can't happen, it can't be done. Well, the first thing you do is show an example of where it can, and it takes the wind out of their sails, and now they're
and it has.
It can.
Yep. Excuse me.
Woo.
Yeah, we often point to the Halifax partnership model up here as one of these highly amalgamated, HRM, the Halifax Regional Municipality. And it really is a singular. The hard part about that example is Halifax is the big prize pony in Nova Scotia for a city, sort of like Toronto's the prize pony in Ontario. And they get all of these exclusive privileges in governance, and they get a lot more latitude to localize decision making like that, which usually my perspective is anyway that the more local you can have your decision making, the more likely you are to come up with the right solution to solve the local problem because you understand it and you got to live next to it, versus the provincially led model, which is what we mostly have in New Brunswick. It's it's a gambit to try to, get everybody into Fredericton, in our capital in that case, and come up with a solution that's going to work for the province, but really doesn't work for half the municipalities to try to roll it out in. The one size fits all kind of approach. But
that would sum up my entire, probably every speech I ever gave when I was in municipal affairs, and every speech since then. I can't fix this for you as a province because there are 422 municipalities, 422 communities, 349 municipalities. I can't fix it for you because I don't know what makes you unique. Like, it'll just be generic. You have to figure out what makes you unique. You have to organize your people. You have to own it. But if you are determined that you're going to do this all by yourself and it's only going to be local, then you're not going to be able to leverage what you need to be competitive on a grander scale. So it's always that balance of local solutions, but regional partnerships so that you can get stuff done that you need to. And too often we overcompensate and say it all has to be regional or it all has to be local. And each we need that balance of, it's kind of like a marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife and I do so well because I'm good at some things and she's good at other things. Do all the laundry, it's right here. So we each do our own thing, but we are stronger together as a couple. And we do things as a couple, and we have our jobs to do as individuals. But if we mix those up and we start to focus on being individuals, selling ourselves separately, but then we don't do anything collaboratively, it becomes backwards. It's all about relationships, understanding the psychology. But psychology is tough. I mean, I think it's an understood field when it comes to municipalities, but it's important to its future.
Well, it's often we think politicians aren't actual humans and that we are somehow above a lot of these normal things. But in reality, getting into politics ourselves, I feel we've learned a lot about how different people work and how to work best with them and move forward with many on some of these issues. So it's interesting to think about it, and in a sense that how can we heal this past sort of chaos that has been going on as a region and move forward together, which is actually their economic development slogan.
Well, and understanding how people think too. I mean, I've got acronyms for them. We all know what NIMBYs are, but they're bananas, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. That's what it stands for. Nope's not on planet Earth. We know that. Not cave people, citizens against virtually everything. And then you've got a new group that's really powerful, because the first four groups will tell you why they're opposed to something. But this new group, I created the acronym FEARS. It stands for Fire Up Everyone Against Reasonable Solutions. And they do it by spreading fear. And if we don't understand...
And that's a fascist play, right? That's a fascist play. Like, let's call that a spade, because fascism is like, we've done some diving into George Monbiot. We really like some of his stuff, but like one of the positions he takes is like fascism is one of these only movements that is able to be successful by firing people up and pointing backward in time to say, let's go back there. And, I'm the strong guy or strong woman who's going to get that done for you. They tend to be the only type of political movement that can be successful in that game. Versus the rest of us have our work cut out for us because we can be visionaries and dreamers about really how to make the municipality work better and be supportive and all this stuff. But it requires people to abandon some of their self-interest. And it also requires us to do a better job at telling them why that will matter and why that will pay off and what the vision is and how we'll get there and all of that. And a lot of,
It's ironic. I don't think everyone who is what I call a fear, like a deliberate fascist mindset. I think 99% of people don't actually know why they feel what they do. They act out of almost, it's a little Freudian, this is what I've done since I'm a kid and I'm just trying to survive, because they don't understand their own psychology. But it is spreading fear is that power play. And the irony is that this is the contradiction. If you're spreading fear, you're trying to gain control and manage your community or govern your community or dominate your community. And yet the whole essence of being a community builder is to give more than you get. That's the only way you build communities. And that's the dichotomy we have now. And there's a lot of fear out there. There's a third of the population that is embracing fear and spreading it to fight tyranny, when actually the tyranny is a bunch of people focused on community building and asking you to give up a little bit of something to make the community better, which invariably makes their lives better.
Yeah.
It's ironic.
Yeah. It is. All right, we should get some questions, because we definitely had some people with some interesting
burning
questions that they have burning questions to pose to you. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So one comes down to a friend, Justin, here, who's talking about the various levels of government and on the housing piece here. Is there a future for clearly documenting responsibility and accountability at all three levels, or giving cities more access and autonomy to funding their own operations without reliance on bilateral funding? So basically, we've seen it all. It's like that Spider-Man meme of everyone pointing at each other. You're responsible for housing. You're responsible for housing, and us all, and even as a municipality, coming down to having to make a decision on where we're putting it out of the cold shelter, which is supposedly the province's thing, right? So how could we better organize ourselves when it comes to some of these things, and actually taking responsibility for the various issues at hand that affect us all?
Yeah, that housing one is so huge, because I'm getting so friggin' pissed off. It's not even funny. If I hear Pierre say one more time that if municipalities just get the way and stop slowing everything down, we'd build housing. It's like, we're over here with turnaround times for permits that are 3 months, and you can build a 150 unit apartment building from zoning application to finished construction in 2 years. We can't find people who want to build here, and the demand is crazy. Like, we don't have big, NIMBY movements that will stop entire areas of cities from building on. But then this question Justin, I think, really brings us out. It's like, well, who gives us the best chance to get things done, and who's in the way? And it's different depending on where you're at. But anyway, yeah, sorry, I had to jump on that.
No, I'm equally frustrated by that, because I hate it when there's finger pointing. And I've seen it a lot. I mean, so it's a housing related issue, but when we had floods in southern Alberta, when I was Minister of Municipal Affairs, there were 29 official municipalities who had tremendous disruption. Some of them more than others. Some of it was just purely devastating. But those didn't even count the Indigenous communities that were flooded and lost their housing too. And I was really thankful that we had such an amazing caucus with the progressive conservatives who all agreed that they're humans, they're people, and they don't have housing. Because it was, people were saying, well, why are you guys going to do something with their housing? They're the federal responsibility, or they're human beings. I don't care. We'll figure out who's going to pay for it after. And if we don't, and we had to pay for it, they're still human beings. This is a ridiculous debate. You don't leave people homeless and say, it's not my responsibility. So the way I picture it, I'd start at the top. I'm a big fan of the Century Initiative. It's a group of former politicians and business leaders that want Canada to get to 100 million people by the year 2100. And I think that's important for many reasons, for our prosperity and our growth. I think that there's going to be a lot of climate refugees from around the world, and we have a responsibility as Canadians to help accommodate some of that. I also think that we need 100 million people just to help stabilize, give us a little more weight and force to our neighbors to the south that I don't know what the hell they're doing. And it's a little frightening at times. So I think we need some of that strength too. But then if we're going to do that, and the federal government's going to continue, last year we were at 1.2 million people. I think they want to get up to 1.5 million people with those targets. Those people need a place to live. Okay, so they're going to move to provinces. Now we've got provinces taking initiatives. Alberta's attracting a lot of people. Nova Scotia's premier announced that he would like to double the population of Nova Scotia by the year 2060. I mean, great initiatives that say, hey, we have an opportunity with newcomers coming from around the world with different skills and expertise, and we want them in our province. Great. So they're coming. They have some responsibility for that too. But when it comes right down to it in the communities, it's going to be the municipal leadership that needs to decide the housing that's needed. What kind of workforce are you attracting? Are you looking at young professionals? Are you looking at semi-retirees? We need to build housing that's appropriate. They're going to have the best relationships with independent developers who are going to be building. They're the ones that are going to have to purchase the land, develop the land, put in the infrastructure. So all of them have a responsibility for helping to continue to attract people. Ultimately, the municipalities and municipal leadership are going to have the costs associated with the majority of that. And I think we need to find some way for the federal and provincial governments to make an equitable contribution to developing that housing to meet those community needs and demands. The only caveat I'd have is that maybe they want to put some parameters around it, because I would not be in favor of a community saying, no, we're not having you or your kind come here. So we're not building that kind of housing. We're not having those young people and the young professionals. No, we're only building 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage for families. No, we're not. We need diversity in housing. And so I think it needs to be less restrictive and more diverse. Like, one of the things we need in Canada right now is a diversity of housing.
Yes.
Young people can't afford to buy many of those 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garages out on the outskirts of the city. But also, even if they can, I've done interviews with hundreds of them in the last year and a half. They don't necessarily want to either.
I don't want to. Yeah.
No,
well, I just talked to I don't want to go to suburbia and be in this sterilized community that lacks any sort of diversity and just looks like boxes every 5 feet. Like, I don't.
I'm not retiring anytime soon, but my wife and I have talked about, when we do retire, we want to be on a main street that's purely walkable, has to be a walkable community. We don't even know if we want to own a vehicle, maybe an e-bike or something. We want to walk down to the yoga studio, walk down to the wine bar, walk down to the brew pub, walk down to a co-working space where we get to meet people. Like, we want to be in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
So these 15-minute cities, these 15-minute communities are incredibly important to what a lot of people are looking for. And that young lady I used as an example that I interviewed, who just graduated from the U of T in April, she did a co-op program, didn't have any student loan debt, had actually money in the bank. I said, oh, you're coming back to Alberta and you're going to buy a house? And she said, no, why would I do that? She said, I wanted to travel the West Coast. I'm going to start in Vancouver. I'm going to go all the way down to San Diego and work my way back up. And I'm going to do it over a year. And so I'm going to rent like a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom furnished place. I'm going to see it. And when I'm done and I get back to Vancouver, I'm going to go across Canada. I've always wanted to explore further east, like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And I'm going to do that for a year. And maybe along the way, I'll find a place that I want to live, and maybe I'll buy. But frankly, why would I want to buy in a place that then I have to sell it to move? Maybe I want to rent for 3 years, and then I'm like, you know what? Now I'm going to go to Edmonton. Or you know what? Now I'm going to go to Saskatoon. Or why would I want to own something? And so it's a different mindset. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to get too excited and talk.
No, it's great.
But we're moving even more so into this gig economy and gig living, and these younger generations, they're not getting married. They're not buying houses. They don't want to, even when they volunteer, they don't want to join, the Elks and show up the third Thursday of every month for the rest of their lives. They're not joining
service clubs. They're doing events. Yeah.
Right. But you give them a cause, they'll do it. They have a relationship, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to last forever. And they don't necessarily want to buy a house that they're supposed to live in forever. It's a different mindset. And so we need to change everything we do about communities, including the way we build housing, to meet those new desires, those new values.
Do you think we can continue to let the market, the open market, dictate the realities around housing like we have? I mean, I think back to the 90s when all levels, provinces and the federal governments just started to pull out of their funding structures for housing. I know, Frank McKenna was one of the leading charges that got rid of the NB Housing Corp here in New Brunswick. Now Joe and I have co-sponsored a motion for the city of St. John to stand up a municipal housing entity, because when we look at solutions and when we look at places that seem to be insulated from the housing, we keep finding Vienna, as well as a few others. And so we look at their ownership model, and it's mostly not the private market or the open market that is owning those. It's not individuals. It's owned by nonprofits. It's owned by the municipality. So is that a solution then, do you think, for the federal government and provinces to say, look, we know we need to fund housing development, but we need to let our municipalities, I guess, some more leash to be able to do things similar to how Vienna has, or other jurisdictions like that?
Minneapolis is another good one. There's
Minneapolis,
lots of housing
Yonkers, New York.
Minneapolis, yeah. There are some good examples. So look, I know that I've debated this with some developers, and we have some developers, even two developers coming to talk at our community camp and debate about the future of housing and when it needs to be. It's, I know one will argue the market's always right. The market will decide. Well, sometimes the market's stupid. I mean, like, otherwise, why would we have had pet rocks? I mean, seriously, someone pulled up rocks, washed them off, put them in a box, and idiots bought them. So the market doesn't always make smart decisions about what it needs.
It certainly doesn't solve
And-
problems unless it's properly incentivized to.
No, I know. And I've had developers who say, we build 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage homes because that's what people buy. But maybe it's a little bit of because we have such a housing demand, you're only servicing part of the market. And yes, you're selling those, but there's a whole other parts of the market going underserved. And it's not because there's no demand. It's because we don't have enough builders. Like, one thing Canada should do, I think, is attract more tradespeople, change the immigration program to allow more tradespeople, because we just don't have enough people to build the houses that we need. So it's a little bit like owning a men's shoe store and saying, well, I only sell men's shoes because only men come in here to buy shoes. It's like, well, but only men come in here to buy shoes because you only sell men's shoes. Which is it? The cart before if that's all the product you have available, of course, that's what people are buying. And so I think there's a role for the market to play. Of course, I don't think the government should take it all over.
No.
But there is a critical element there, and maybe it's 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20%, depending on the community, where the municipality has identified its unique need. It's identified the unserviced market. I mean, the municipality is doing an economic development strategy for the community, and it may identify that we have some tech firms that want to move here. We need young professionals, but they have no housing, and the developers aren't doing it. So we need 2-bedroom apartments people can rent. They don't want to buy yet, but they need. So there is a place. There's always been a place in the market for the government to have some interventions to make sure that needs are met. That's the beauty. That's why I think Canada is such a wonderful place. That's why other countries that, some people would call socialist, like Norway and Finland and Switzerland, and even have social interventions to help make sure that they're addressing the needs of their community. The free market, I mean, if you follow the free market, you get the United States, and they have some big issues to deal with their education, with their poverty, I don't think the free market is a 100% answer for anything.
No.
So.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I think we've probably taken a lot of your time here, Doug.
Oh, I'll talk about this as long as you want. I'm passionate. We can make this the longest podcast you've ever had.
In history. Let's just 24 hours. We're going. This pod doesn't stop. Was there another one you wanted to throw out, Joe, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if everyone's all good here. So I guess, what are the biggest obstacles to fighting the status quo? This is from our friend Morgan, another podcast listener, really wondering, what are the biggest obstacles to fighting the status quo that you've seen in municipalities, and who are the solutions? And I think you've touched on this in a few different ways, but just anything out there, like, we run up against this and just having you feel like we have to do research papers when it comes to, say, proposing a municipal housing entity, which we did do, and just making sure we overcompensate a lot for trying to prove a point, looking towards a different future for our industrial city. And it's taken a lot of time. It takes a lot of lobbying and consensus building for us to do that. So is there any suggestions, any hot tips?
Yeah. It's not a short process. And I don't know that you're ever done the process to help get people in the mindset for change. The biggest thing that holds us back, and the reason why things don't change, is because people hate the way things are. The only thing they hate more than that is anything changing. And it's ironic, because people will complain all the time, and you're like, okay, let's do things different. Like, you can't do that. That's no. Well, you can't demand change and then not want anything to change. But we get in such a rut with such security. Like, we go back to that the QWERTY keyboard sort of example, and so in my mind, it's more about education. Whenever we do engagement processes with the public in our municipalities that we work with, I tell the elected officials right up front, I'm not doing a survey. If I do a survey, I know what the answers will be. 1, our politicians are idiots. 2, you don't pave the potholes, and I want the potholes paved. And 3, taxes are too high. Well, that's about as useful as everybody feels that way. And it's not meaningful and has nothing to do with a strategy to move your community forward. And this is the core of the reason why people don't like change. Every single community I have ever talked to, one of the dominant mindsets is that, well, if we do something different, we might fail. But they don't recognize that if they don't do anything different, they're probably going to fail anyway. We assign risk to change, but we don't assign risk to not changing. And there's that flight, fright, or freeze. Most municipalities are in this freeze scenario because everyone talks about fight or flight. Freeze is the more dominant, just don't move, be quiet, and they'll ignore you. And so we're stuck in this freeze mindset, and we're scared to do something different because we might die. But if we don't do something different when we sit there and we're frozen, we're probably going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need, again, to incorporate, I wish we could incorporate this more into our school system, learning about psychology and mindsets, our cognitive biases that hold us back, our fear of risk that holds us back, our mindset, understanding our own natural brains, where if something changes, we're like, oh, that scares me, freeze. We need to understand our own psychology more so that we're not, sort of overruled by these basic primitive animalistic instincts that have hounded us. We've evolved to the point where we think we're rational people, but we're still dominated 90% of the time by our emotions and by our animalistic instincts, and that's what's holding communities back. I mean, the evolution of humanity, in my mind, is when we stop always thinking about us as individuals and start recognizing legitimately that we're better off when we work in a collective.
Mm-hmm.
Even hunters and gatherers understood we have to work together to gather fruit and bring down the woolly mammoth or whatever we hunted. Now we've got this powerful, independent, individualistic mindset where freedom comes at and can never be compromised. But we forget that responsibility to each other goes with it too.
Well, mathematically, we know game theory and, Richard Nash and these types of collusion is the best mode of getting the best outcome for everybody. But yes, I think, Joe, you say this often, like feelings aren't facts, and being able to understand that you may have a feeling that may not be telling you a fact. It just is a feeling, right? That's a big jump for a lot of people to make. And especially
it's still
around
something we have to practice,
and especially around the decision-making table around council, because as soon as a councillor gets heated, as soon as one councillor, and I can be that guy, I know when to turn it on and I know when to turn it off. I don't always have good control over it, but as soon as somebody takes the example to an extreme and becomes emotional about it, you can lose any ability to come to a consensus or decision on it ever again. It just gets stuck.
That's the rule. Anytime someone did not use reason to get themselves into a mindset, you cannot use reason to get them out of it.
That's a good one.
And my example is that my wife, I grew up in the back of a little 4-seater Cessna, bounced all over the countryside, but my wife is terrified of flying. And the first time we traveled to go over to Portugal, that's where her family's from. She was born in Canada, but we went over to see her parents. Bad turbulence in the air. And it didn't bother me at all, but she was nails dug into my hand. She was terrified. And I thought, oh, she's not being reasonable. She's afraid. Like, it's an emotional response. So I'll give her some facts to calm her down. It didn't work. I told her, there's a 1 in a million chance this plane will fall out of the sky from turbulence. Well, that was not the right answer. I should have said there's no chance. But to her, she heard you telling me there's a chance. It's the whole 1 in a million. And so when the other thing we need is that when we're facing people with those powerful emotions that are having them, the cognitive biases that work them up, the NIMBYs, NOPEs, banana K people and fears where it's irrational and emotionally based. We also have to learn how to communicate to them and bring them down. And it's not with facts. We need to, and most of the problem we have in politics is that in every aspect of our lives, we say what we want to say instead of saying what we need to so that the other person hears us properly.
Right.
That so much. That's so true. Oh, gosh, amazing. Thanks, Jerry, for connecting us too. It's really great to hear from people, not just from our own backyard, and to hear your more global perspectives.
I appreciate that. Thanks for what you guys do, Joanna, Brent. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
We'll be in touch again soon.
Sounds good. Take care.